Hello, and thank you for taking the time to go through Canvas. We're going to start today by looking at functions. Functions are the most essential part of programming. We say that they are things our computer can do. So for example, I can clap my hands, or I can talk. And right now, my computer can do nothing. There are no functions on this page. So let's add a function so our computer can do stuff. So I'm going to say void setup, circle brackets, squiggle brackets. Feel free to pause the video at this time and make sure that you have this down. So now let's talk about what the words mean. First is void. Void is just like the Minecraft word underneath the bedrock. In there is nothing. Void means nothing. So what does it mean in this case? It means that we're returning nothing to the rest of our code. We're not giving any information directly back to other code. Now we're not going to use this right now, but in a few lessons we will. So void setup. Next word, setup. Setup is just a name. Now it can be anything. We can say hello. It doesn't really matter, but what you will see is that hello is not a deep blue like setup is. That's because setup is a special function that happens whenever you press play. Next is our circle brackets. Now our circle brackets are called the parameters, and it's how we receive information from other functions, which again, we will be using soon. Next is our squiggle brackets, and this is the most important part. Our squiggle brackets is what the function does. So currently the function does nothing because there's nothing here. But if I was to add the line print hello, then now it would say hello. And you can see that in the console whenever I press play. But if I was to move this outside of the brackets, you'd see that I'd get an error and it would not work because it is not being done by anything. Now there's another important thing here to note. All brackets come with a partner. And that is the most common source of a mistake, is brackets must have a partner. Now that we have set up, practice and make a new function. This time the name will be called draw. Pause the video for a second, try to get it. Okay, and let's make it. So void draw, just like this. Okay. Now, we have our two different functions. Setup happens when you press play, and draw happens every single frame. So let's add a print line here so we can see this. We're going to say print, and just an I. And we can see that it prints an I every single frame. And let's add a print here, and it's going to be an X. And you'll see that now it says X and then I, because this only happens once, and this happens every frame. And it's important to be cautious of this when we're making our tools. Now let's talk about function calls. So there's a lot of functions that already exist. For example, print is a function that already exists. Now if we want to actually be able to change the screen from, this tiny weird box that does nothing, we need to call the size function. So we're going to say size, and then the x and the y, or there's two parameters, the width and the height, is how big our screen is going to be. So a good number is 800, 800. And then at the very end, we end our sentence. Now you'll notice these circle brackets, and what goes in the circle brackets is directly corresponding to what will go in the circle brackets of the functions later. We'll talk about this soon. So now when I press play, I get a much bigger screen. Now we're going to try this again. So again, in this case, remember that size is a name, then we do circle brackets to tell the code it's a function, and then inside the circle brackets are three parameters. So now we're going to do the background function. And the background function takes three parameters, and we're going to keep the parameters as 0, 0, 0 for now. Try that and see if you can get it, and put it in draw. Okay, hopefully you were able to try it. So just over here, I'm going to say background 0, 0, 0. And now when I press play, my screen is black. And if you want to change the color to something else, we can go to Tools, Color Selector, and we can look at the RGB, red, green, and blue. And looking at this box here, I can choose my color. So let's say I want a pink screen. I'm going to go to pink. And then I'll choose my color. And then my RGB. Okay, and now when I press play, there it is. So those functions already exist. What if I wanted to add my own function? So let's try that. I'm going to do the exact same thing that I've been doing, but I'm going to name it after myself. So take a moment, make a new function, and just name it after yourself. Once you've done that, it should look something like this. Now, this function currently does nothing because there's nothing inside the brackets. So if I was to call the function in draw, well, nothing would change because there is nothing inside the brackets. It does nothing. However, if I was to add something in here, well, you can probably predict what will happen. Now it'll start printing because draw calls Gabe and Gabe calls print. So now let's make it so that way Gabe creates a circle. So we're going to say circle. So circle has 3 parameters. It has an x, how left and right it'll be. It has a y, how up and down it'll be. And it has a size, how big it'll be. So let's say 100 by 200 by 300, just to see how this looks. And there you go. We get a nice little circle. And we can change these numbers and we can just see how it looks. Now, as we go on, we're going to customize this a lot more. And in the next class, or next video, you should see a lot more of this. We'll be playing around with this. Okay. So now that we've drawn a circle, we can go further. These circle brackets allow us to customize things and make our functions more reusable. Let's make it so that way our functions do different things every time. We're going to add a variable in here. We're just going to say float x and float y for now. Don't really worry about what these are. We'll talk about them in the next class, but they're just numbers with a decimal is what float means. Number with a decimal. Now you'll see this causes an error, and it says that the function Gabe expects parameters float, and that's because we said over here we have a float x and y. So to fix this, all I need to do is put in a number, which I'll just do 200, 200, and you see the error goes away. You also see a line over here saying the variable is not being used. This is not an error, it's just a warning. And to fix it, we'll just say x, y over here. Now when I press play, nothing has changed, but that's exactly what we want. So I'll copy Gabe again, make a few copies of it, format it properly, and then I'll change the numbers. So now this one's 400, 400, 400, 400, and now take a moment to guess what you think will happen when I press play. And when I press play, I get 4 circles. And that's how functions work. So functions allow us to repeat stuff really, really quickly just by having a bunch of them. You can make your own, and there's a bunch that already exist. And if you want to find more that already exist, you can go to the processing.org website and you can find references there. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do.